Today on the Crested Butte is Home podcast, my guest is Big Air Barb Peters, and she got that nickname back in the 90s during the U.S. Extreme Skiing Championships, as they were then known. Now it's usually called the Big Mountain Competition. But so we have a good time talking about the early days of Extreme Skiing Championships. And then we switch subjects about halfway through, and we talk about the Rocky Mountain Rendezvous, which is something that Barb is very interested in. You may have seen them set up at Washington Gulch with the tipis and such, and basically it's a historical reenactment of the early 1800s and the mountain men and women that were in the Rocky Mountains at that time before the miners got here. So that's an event that I really didn't know a whole lot about, and it was fun to talk about that, and hope you enjoy the show. As always, please subscribe on Apple or on Android and leave me a review. Really appreciate that. Even if it's a critical one, I'm always trying to make this podcast better, so I appreciate one that I just got recently, and hopefully I made my recording levels a little bit better. Anyway, let's get on with the show. Today on the Crested Butte is Home podcast, my guest is Barb Peters. And Barb, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and how you got here?
Originally from Southern California, born in Torrance Beach, California.
Nice.
In 72. And kind of grew up as a beach kid, surfing, body surfing, anything water beach. Come in 1980, my mother and I moved out here after the divorce, but it was actually one of the best moves I think that could have happened, because going from Los Angeles type setting to, at the time, Crested Butte was about 800 people in town.
Yeah.
And so it was a completely different environment for me to grow up in, from one contrast to the next.
The second biggest city, yeah.
And I remember in October, it was when we moved here.
Oh, wow. So, yeah,
and
school had restarted.
Yeah, it was muddy. It had been raining. Snowing, just the fact that there was mud everywhere was completely foreign to me, being, the California city kid.
Right.
Surfer girl type thing, to mountain mud and weather and just snow full time. Because I'd always skied from age 2 in California on family vacations, but nothing that was full on year round until I moved to Crested Butte.
Nice.
So found this way through, Mom had done a ski trip with some friends back in the 70s.
Really?
And it was either here or Telluride to move to, and so I kind of narrowly missed that one and ended up in Crested Butte. So.
Wow, that's really cool. So just one trip that your mom had taken, and was just like, yep, we're backing up, we're moving.
Yeah, this was a great place. It had everything that she was looking for to raise me as a single mother, and it was a very tight-knit community. My class had maybe 7-8 people in it, my age, on the whole of town.
Yeah. Yeah. And you had to go down to Gunnison starting in what, the 7th grade? Is that?
By the time I got up there, it was high school. Had to start going down to Gunnison.
All right, so just...
and we actually, our school was where the town hall is. I had gone to school there.
Yeah, totally.
So it's kind of funny to go into Jerry's gym and all that stuff and remember PE and breakdancing back in the 80s.
Right, it wasn't
small town breakdancing. It certainly wasn't, the city kind. But I think a lot of those things are attractive to my mom to moving here.
Yeah.
And I was pretty much athletic. I played soccer a lot in California, and like I said, ocean a lot.
Yeah.
Junior lifeguards, doing that type of thing. And so it was just kind of a good, send off to another end of sports. So it was biking and rafting and skiing and just about pretty much everything else.
All the mountain sports.
And, anything you find.
Nice. Nice, super cool.
So that's how I ended up in Crested Butte.
I love hearing all these stories. It's fun. So, well, let's, even though it's the middle of summer, we're going to jump straight into skiing. And at one time, you were known as Big Air Barb. So how'd you get that nickname?
I didn't make it up.
Fair enough.
Gave me that one. So it's not a bad one. I could think of a lot worse ones to be called. But back in the early days, Alaska, I believe it was 90 91 was the first actual competition.
In Valdez, Alaska.
In Valdez, Alaska. And after Kim and all those guys had discussed, possibly turning it into something, Crested Butte was a perfect location for them. And so that first year, 91, 92, they came in with the U.S. Extreme Skiing Competition. And back when it was extreme skiing.
Yes, everything was extreme. Yeah.
And so that was funny because that year that it came in was the year that I really quit snowboarding. I had started snowboarding and competing back in the late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. And so I started skiing again that year. The competition came into town, and I was just super jazzed because it just sounded kind of crazy and fun. Like, well, you're going to have a competition of people skiing on the stuff we ski every day.
And this is the very first one then?
Very first one, the first actual one in the States, that wasn't a world type of competition.
Right.
It was more of the national.
Yeah.
But as far as the first inception of something like this, Crested Butte was the first to host it.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to be here and have the money to afford the entry fee.
Nice.
And the early days were pretty funny because I actually had gone to, there wasn't sponsorships or anything at that time. So I knocked on the doors of every restaurant, every business in town locally for any donation, $10, $5, $20, whatever they wanted to donate to help raise for my entry fee.
Nice.
And insurance. And they totally pulled through, and they did for many years past that. But
wow!
But the first year was pretty exciting.
Awesome. Well, I guess we should say so. The extreme skiing comp, for anyone who doesn't know. So yeah, we were just skiing down all the steepest slopes of Crested Butte, and there were 5? Well, back then there were 6 different categories.
6 categories. I was trying to remember
because there was air back in the day.
Air was the 6th category, and I kind of thought that was interesting because there was a lot of people that could ski very well that didn't huck themselves off of cliffs or anything, and I think it was all, it's all part of it.
Yeah, but there was so there was control, fluidity, line choice,
difficulty of line, and fluidity, control,
technique. I think was one.
Style, technique, and then air, and so it was really fun the first few years because it was not totally sanctioned. It wasn't completely.
Yeah, they hadn't totally figured it out.
Yeah, figured out. You didn't even have to have helmets the first year. Was not required.
Yeah. I remember the first year I did it, I had to buy a helmet. It was like this cheesy kayak helmet thing, too.
I think it was at Scotty Ewing selling all those.
It probably was. It probably was.
But yeah, there was a time that we didn't have to ski in helmets, although air was part of the judging category.
Right, yeah.
But again, it was interesting. But for me, the first years, I always enjoyed jumping off cliffs and just challenging myself that way. So as far as my name goes, that's kind of the first couple of years. I was really one of the few girls that would ever even think about doing anything like that.
Nice.
So I think that's probably where my name came from.
Cool. So how did those go? How did those first comps go? Where'd you finish and things?
The first couple of comps, it was interesting because we had different, for the females, we had a lot of different backgrounds. We had racing backgrounds. We had mogul backgrounds. We had people like me who were just basically ski bums, with maybe some racing background when we were young.
Yeah.
And then just a total mishmash of athletes, really, that were just really ready to go and prove themselves, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, we all were just out for the challenge. And the first few years, I placed 4th, or I think the first year, and then as more women started adding in, I kind of dropped back into like 7th or so. But then, after about 4 or 5 years, I realized that I really liked doing this, and I should probably start training and taking it seriously. And so then after that, I started placing more podiums, 1, 2, and 3, more consistently as the years went in. So the first years was interesting, as far as who my competition was. It changed throughout the many years. 15 years, I think, that I competed in those.
Yeah.
So it was It was really fun. The first years, I remember we would all sit down at Elks, or Antlers, I think it was.
Antlers, yeah. The dugout.
The dugout. It was the dugout, that's right.
I worked there, that's why I know.
And I remember we would sit and watch the videos of the day's runs. JSP, who had filmed it,
Yeah.
would have us sit down, and we would enjoy pitchers of beer and watch each other's runs and cheer each other on, because some of us didn't get to see each other's runs because we were at the starting gate or for whatever reason.
On the lift, yeah.
We couldn't see anybody. So that was something that I really cherished the first few years that is no longer kind of part of that first core group.
Yeah.
So I think as far as some of those first years, that was some of the best part of it.
Nice.
It was a tribe. It wasn't...
Yeah. It still is. It's still a tribe.
Oh, I'm sure. I certainly hope it is. Because it's funny. I've met friends, that I know all over the world now because of these competitions and having that chance, and just amazing individuals that I've been fortunate to have in my life and call friends.
Yeah.
So great experience. Certainly hope that the kids these days are getting that same that I did all those years ago. But that was the camaraderie, I think, is what was the best part for those first years.
Yeah, definitely. What was your most memorable moment, do you think? And I know which one mine is, because I can...
I think it's probably the one that everyone thinks of is the snowball.
The chunk of snow.
Third bowl hourglass. I would say that's probably, and I see that, I revisit it every now and again, because it is still just kind of one of those, holy cow.
Yeah.
I almost just got ran over by a snowball.
And did you, so for people who didn't see that, so you hit a huge pillow, and the pillow broke off, and it was chasing you down the mountain. Did you know that it was behind you, or were you just skiing along?
I was just continuing on my line, and I heard the crowd screaming for, I think, a little bit longer than just a landing would have... suffice, but then I kind of did actually hear through the helmet and everything this very strange noise that you just don't want to hear when you're out in the snowy, anything. It was just a weird, crunching, weighty, crunchy, like if you're making a snowball, but it's the size of a Volkswagen Bug. Right. And it's rolling right next to you and towards you. I didn't really notice it until it actually hit my pole as it went by and I turned away. It was... pure luck that I didn't hit that.
But you weren't turning into it, you were turning away.
I just had made the turn as it came by. So, and looking at that video, it literally hit my pole as I was coming around for that turn. And that's when I noticed. I would say that was probably more fans, I think, love that moment.
Oh, yeah.
I think for me, it was probably just the head wall rock. Probably the one that got my name was hitting Barb's Rock. I hucked myself so big, I was so scared to do it, but I just felt that in order to kind of establish myself, I really had to do something different.
Yeah.
And so I went a lot bigger, a lot faster than I was planning, and I ended up landing it, but I ended up putting my ski pole through my bottom lip at the same time.
Awesome.
But the best part was I got back up for the second run and skied it too. So I think for me, that was probably my most memorable moment, was establishing for myself that I really wanted to do this.
And which rock is this? I guess I don't know.
Headwall, they'd call it Rabbit Ears Rock for a long time before that.
Yeah.
And then it's just that big block rock off the right side, skier's right. And well, I mean, I didn't name it. Every time I go snowpacking in the ski patrol every winter, when they're describing that area, that's how they describe it. So I'm going to go with it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue with it.
Yeah.
I got a rock named on the mountain for me, I'm happy.
Totally. No, claim to fame. It's awesome. It's awesome. All right, well, let's take a quick break. On today's Crested Butte Real Estate Minute, I wanted to talk a little bit about condominium HOAs in the area. And one thing that I always stress to my clients is to always make sure that they're comparing apples to apples. So if there is a condo that you're looking at that has really high dues, well, just make sure that you know what that covers, because it might include cable and internet and sometimes even heat. And they might have great reserves in case something happens to the roof or another major expenditure. And you can compare that to perhaps a condo that has really low dues, but they may not have any reserves, and it may not cover a lot, so you're still paying out of pocket every month anyway for some of the items that aren't covered. So just some things to think about when you're looking at condos. Don't dismiss a condo outright just because you think the dues are a little bit high, and that would go for everywhere, not just Crested Butte. So that's a quick little talk about that. My website is crestedbutterealestateagent.com, and my name is Frank Kinsella, and all my contact info is there, and I'd love to talk to you about real estate in Crested Butte or Gunnison, and let's go back to the show. Coming back, we're going to switch subjects, and now we're going to go to summer, and we're going to talk about the Rendezvous. And I don't even know if that's the right name for it, but tell us about the Rendezvous.
All right, well, it's basically a historical reenactment of a time period in American history of the mountain man fur trade in 1820 to 1840.
Okay.
So for the history buffs, if you want to look it up, for those of you who have watched Revenant, the movie that came out, that is pretty loosely based on an actual mountain man, Jim Bridger, that is a lot of what the history that we are portraying and trying to reenact.
Okay.
And so we are one of many reenactments of this mountain man fur trade. There's actually national events that hundreds of people come to dressed in period correct clothing, and everything, all the accoutrement from your tent and canvas to the shoes on your feet to the sunglasses if they had them back then. You're very limited, as far as what you can bring in or what you can see. So we are trying our best in a modern time to live as our ancestors and predecessors had, as best to our abilities with what we can get these days. They don't make things quite like they did back then.
Yeah.
And so we try to do our best to portray that small slice of time.
So do you get like bonus points if your outfit is like been stitched with natural stitching versus nylon and whatever?
Well,
like you try to do that, like get it all the way down to the nitty gritty.
That's really kind of the point. We are history reenactors. We're also historians. We definitely study endlessly on the subject. So everything from Indian patterns, from beadwork at the time, because during that time the French traders, which is Rendezvous is French, which comes from Hudson Bay and some of the other fur trade companies at that time, they would rendezvous basically means to meet.
Yeah.
As it would.
Because everyone was just all throughout all the mountains, all the valleys, everywhere.
From New Mexico,
scattered.
From Santa Fe to Canada, pretty much throughout the Rocky Mountains. And you'd have the Santa Fe Trail, and you'd have just a very few trails at that time that we're going through, because this was, right after the Civil War. At that time, that America was kind of still not really paying attention to, west of the Mississippi. So they were really trying to get, more stuff coming out as far as trade stuff from England, glass beads from Russia, Italy, France, silk from France and China. So these are trade items that they would come trade with the Indians at that time. So these fur trappers, French, Canadian, you would have, a lot of different backgrounds for a lot of these men and individuals. And some of them actually started out as mountain men at age 15.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're really trying to educate, a part of history that just really isn't taught in schools. It's not in depth. You can actually hold 200-year-old beads that people have collected. We do definitely take it very seriously. We like to have our fun, too.
I was going to say, we'll get to that probably, too.
But as far as what we are doing up there is it's basically a reenactment, just like you might see out east with the Civil War reenactments or anything. Everything to the buttons on our shoes, to the stitches in our clothing, we prefer them to be as accurate, time period accurate as possible.
Yeah, nice.
If you can find it. smoked brain tanned hides from deer, not necessarily manufactured, that you can order online.
Okay.
So yes, you do actually get bigger points for that. It's just more respect for taking the time and effort to really focus on your character, what you're representing. A lot of people choose to pick their own heritage to try to represent their outfit.
Okay.
There's a lot of different. My character is kind of more portrayed as a Sioux Indian female. I'm kind of lost in the idea of whether I'm a mother or a warrior, which I think I'm both. Now that my son's older, I think I could be a warrior again. But we try to pick a character and just try to go with that character throughout, and whatever rendezvous we end up going to, whether it's the Happy Canyon in Sims Mesa, or the Como out in Fairplay area, or the Nationals that we were hoping to have this year over in Creed. And that's where I said, Nationals is where you really get to see handcrafted items from people that hand wove everything. Socks, hats.
Wow.
So that's just to give you an idea of how literal we try to get with our reenacting, and as close as we can get to the real thing. Some people are very, very sticklers on it. Others aren't quite as, as authentic.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a learning experience, and it takes time. And that's kind of the fun part about it is it takes time to collect all of this stuff.
Yeah. So what, and it goes on for how many days?
It depends on which one. Typically a week.
Okay.
So ours is starting, Wednesday for participants, Friday, Saturday. Weekends, we usually have public come in so that they can come and buy items or, throw tomahawk and knife, enjoy some of the merriment. Kids are welcome. We have lots of kids games and stuff like that for all our children that show up. They're also dressed authentically and certainly act like wild animals as well.
Perfect.
Which is encouraged. And it's a very, tight-knit community. It's a very welcoming atmosphere. We're very tolerant of pretty rowdy behavior, but all in all, we take care of each other in the end of it. So as far as, we're not unapproachable, we love what we do, but we want to teach. We want to, express this to people. So it's something we definitely want people to come out. So if you're anywhere near any rendezvous or you see it from, New York State to California to Oregon to New Mexico, check it out.
Yeah,
totally worth it.
Sounds like I need to. So we're recording this at the end of July, so it's basically early August is usually when you try to do the Crested Butte.
Crested Butte has religiously been during Arts Festival weekend.
Okay.
Just for the fact that the weather's usually better. We have some rain. It's not quite as hot. And then just because of the tourism, we have a lot of people in town, and it just gives us a good opportunity to kind of share what we do.
Gotcha. So what, let's kind of circle back. So in this area specifically, like you said you studied the history, so was there a lot of going on here specifically in the Crested Butte and Gunnison area that you know of?
As far as this area, there's a few locations for rendezvous. The more historical ones are in Montana and Wyoming.
Yeah, you hear about that all the time.
And that is
obviously
where the actual sites, historically correct sites, are. There are a few areas in the West Elks that have been kind of trading posts and important parts of that history. Not a major part, as far as people coming together, as far as the bigger rendezvous, but there is a lot of history in that realm of mountain men. Mostly in Crested Butte, it was Ute hunting grounds, and throughout Gunnison. So all this area, they would come up in spring after the snows would melt, and they would come do their hunting because it was just really great. All the animals come down for the fresh green that's growing, and they would supply themselves and their whole tribe for months and months and months, to the point of saving enough for winter. They would go to Grand Junction and Montrose for the winter. They would not stay up here because
a little cold and snowy.
They're smarter than that. 10 feet of snow, I think. They weren't really big into skiing back then, but as far as our history in our area here, it is definitely Utes. That was the tribe that utilized this area. This was their summer hunting grounds. And as far as my history on this area, that was about the end of it, really. Come 1850s, they were pushed out on a reservation. So
right. Once the mining started, and other things. So what's a typical day at the Rendezvous look like?
Well, coffee, of course.
And that has to be done right, too, right? Is there just like grounds in a pot or how they...
Actually, you can. We do have some folks. I do my Camp 4.
Okay.
I'm loyal to my local businesses. And Al's definitely got me addicted.
Yep.
But what we would do is back in the day, what they would do is they'd take the raw green bean and they would pan fry it in their cast iron or a pot over fire.
Okay.
And then they'd put them in a sack, flour sack or gunny sack, and they'd pound it with a hammer or a rock and crush it up, dump it right into their pot of water, and there is your coffee.
Just pour it off the top and try not to get grounds in?
I'm sure they didn't mind if they ate a little bit of it. It was different then, and anything that you brought out, you had to carry on your horse or your mule or on your pack. So the equipment and everything that you would use would be very limited. It would be a lot of, tack type biscuits, dry tack. It would be, jerky, pemmican, any kind of wild edibles that you might be able to gather along the way. So a lot of that type of thing would be a more legitimate source of food of eating at that time. Of course, at Rendezvous, they would have, because it was such a big encampment, and about 1,000 or more people from the traders to Indian groups as well, tribes coming in to trade their goods, as well as the mountain men coming in with their furs would come in. They would have a lot of, they would have Indians or other, hunters go out and gather food, hunt for deer and stuff for the Rendezvous, to gather for more feasts, things like that. So much more plentiful off the land. So a lot of the food in that sense, obviously with modern times, we just go to the store, pick up, and stick it in our coolers. But most people, that are very serious do, live that way. Their camp is literally as literal of that time as
1820s to 18, yeah.
So yeah, you have to get creative sometimes, but cast iron's always a good thing to bring to these. One pot meals, stews, things like that, because you can, hit pheasant, get quail, anything that you can hunt. It's pretty much fair game.
Okay. So continuing with this typical day, so you had your coffee, which may or may not be Camp 4, and then you're moving
so you
on
wake up. Typically for us, it's a cannon to announce that coffee's ready. So that's around 6:30.
Okay, that'll wake you up.
And that's pretty early. And if you've had a rough night or stayed up late, a little too much in the bottle, then it's pretty darn early. That cannon's kind of more to remind you that you're alive. And then you just kind of get up on your day and do your personal, grooming, get dressed, maybe gather wood, split some wood for breakfast, start cooking breakfast. And then some of the other days we would have competitions. So we'd have muzzle loading competitions, and those will start up usually around 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Depending on what day it is or how we decide to run it, how many people enter. We also have tomahawk and knife competitions, spear throwing competitions, and a primitive bow competition. So bow and arrow. All primitive, all period correct in that sense. Flintlocks would be more period correct, but as they are expensive and hard to come by for some people, and for some people just starting off, we do allow percussion caps for some of the shoots. But it still has to be a muzzle load. It still has to be black powder. It still has to be a fixed sight. So, it has to be within that time period or previously. It has to be something that was available at that time.
Yeah, sure.
So the typical day is something like that. Get your food going, hang out with your neighbor, or go visit some friends you might have not seen or want to catch up after a long winter. And, it's really pretty relaxed because you kind of have all day to do something. Myself, I'm usually running around as the bourgeois, making sure everybody's happy, everybody has what they need, everyone's safe and healthy, no health issues or or any needs, that the encampment needs or any of the participants are requiring. So my typical day is to kind of go around and talk with everybody and just check in.
Yeah, there you go. And you said booze way. That's the French for bouche way. Okay.
So it's pronounced with 2 O's, so it's kind of a longer bouge way. Again, it's French.
and that's like the director of it.
And basically, it is the head man of the camp.
Gotcha.
Woman in this case. And then you have a segundo, which is not French.
I was going to say, like, wait, isn't that Spanish?
But segundo is basically second in charge, or your vice president, or however you want to lay it out. This year I actually have 2 segundos.
Nice.
And it has worked out pretty well from my standpoint, as we have 3 women running this rendezvous now.
Wow, cool.
And it's not unheard of, but it's definitely not something very common. So
nice.
I am kind of proud of that fact after being able to, be asked to take it over and happily taking it over. I've seen that my girls have pulled in through for me, and so
that's really cool.
So we got our women, Brandy and Ellen, to help as the segundos this year.
Nice. You mentioned it before, but so for the public who's not involved, what can they do? What can they?
What we ask, and this is pretty typical of any rendezvous you're going to go to or experience, is they will have a parking area, and we ask that you walk in. If you do have dogs or any furries like that, keep them on a leash at all times. It's of course Forest Service rules, anyways. But
and the location is, by the way, I don't
it's
think we
in the
mentioned
Forest Service, yes. So
in Washington Gulch.
It's out Washington Gulch, about 6 miles off the main road up Gothic towards the mountain. And so we just ask that you kind of respect, the participants and their property, because like I said, some of these things are very valuable. We're more than happy to share and discuss. Ask before you take pictures, just kind of basic politeness. Bring, an awe of childhood and curiosity, and just come experience, and don't be afraid to throw a knife or a tomahawk at a stump, and and bring the kids to come enjoy it. And yes, we do shoot off cannons and we do shoot off guns, but it's done, in an entertaining way, safe way. We've done it for many, many years. And it just really kind of helps you set back into that time. So if you love living history, if you love something that's old, that is a part of American history, come in, check it out. We do ask that, and this goes again for any rendezvous, that after about 6 o'clock, we do ask that people are in period correct clothing so that we can continue with what we're trying to portray, so that we can enjoy what we're doing.
And you can actually get into it at another level or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the point, is we want to be submerged into this lifestyle. You know, and a lot of us are, and a lot of participants do literally live this way year-round in buckskins, using fires as their main heat source and cooking source. And so it's just a very interesting group of people and friends and family, dare I say, at this point. Brothers, sisters, fight and quarrel, but always love each other to the end. But just come in, check it out, be nice, be welcoming. We will be the same, and just come check it out.
Nice. Well, I guess one last question. You kind of got into it, but why'd you get into it? Why do you love it?
I don't know. I guess I've always had that interest of Indians. It was always something that I just was drawn to. Tuck, as we know, is another famous mountain man in town who's been doing it for a long time. Introduced me, and Mike Radaman, who is also the one that had run it for the many previous years before I took it over, had been here since the 80s with York running it, and we just fell in through knowing, I guess, through my mom, because she was older, and it was older friends, and they had mentioned it. He invited me out to Billy Creek one year, which wasn't even the Crested Butte rendezvous. I went out to another rendezvous, and after that, in 89, 90, I believe, is the first year I actually rendezvoused.
So you're high school then, still, right?
I was 19.
Okay, just after.
Yeah, I was like around 18 or so. Yeah, I think it was around 18. Because it was before I started competing. I was 19 when I stared competing. It correlates right around the same time.
I was going to say, both things happen at the same time.
And same with my rafting career. That was another one that happened. The same correlate with the skiing. Every winter I did that. Every summer I went rafting on the Arkansas. But as far as the Crested Butte, that was what made it difficult. Actually, was the rafting was every weekend. I had to miss a couple of years of Rendezvous in the early years of the '90s. Mm-hmm. But then, come '94, I got back into it and delved headfirst into it. Started buying, stuff that I needed, all my cooking gear, clothing, just talking to people. It's always good to bring money to Rendezvous. If you don't have anything, there's someone sure is there to sell you something that you might need. But then after that, it's just kind of been part of my life. I really can't express the mental, revival for me at certain times of year to be able to just go out, set up camp, relax for a couple of days, turn the phones off, disconnect from everything modern, in that sense, and just kind of really get my feet back in the dirt and smell the campfires, and just really enjoy it. So now I just don't think it'll ever leave me. So
that's awesome.
So what got me into it is just the love, I think, of history, friends that have introduced it to it, the family that I met when I got there and continue to have, and the newer folks that I get to meet, and the even newer folks that I hope get interest and come, experience it, participate. Our numbers are dropping. Our old guys are dying off, and we need some new youth and some new blood to really kind of continue what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So if you have any interest in any of those things, definitely good place to start.
I was going to say, hopefully someone listening to this is like, that sounds cool. I got to check it out. So,
and they have them from Oregon, like I said, Oregon to Pennsylvania to Florida.
Well,
So they do have them just about everywhere. Iowa, everywhere, literally.
Yeah.
So no matter where you're at and where you're hearing this from,
you can
look it up. There's people online, Facebook pages.
Yeah.
Get curious.
Yeah. Nice.
That's how it all starts.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's start to wrap this up. Crested Butte is home for you. It's still home for you. Why do you still stay here in Crested Butte?
I really wanted to raise my son here. I thought that was important for me to, be in a smaller community. He's now actually in Durango going to school now because our school's gotten bigger than I wanted it to be for him, but that's cool. I still really love the area. I still have a ton of friends here, so it's really hard. And to be honest, Frank, after 38, 39 years of living here, I don't know where else I might be happy.
Yeah.
It would have to be another small town like this was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I think for me to pick up and leave. But I'm going to hold on as long as I can.
Yeah, for sure. We all will.
And,
Nice. Well, where can people learn more about you and or the Rendezvous?
Well, me, you could just ask around town. Most people know Big Air Barb. And online, like I said, there's a lot of Facebook pages. Just look up Rendezvous. You can Google it.
It's just Crested Butte Rendezvous, I think.
It's UFT, Crested Butte Rendezvous. It's under a couple of different things because like I said, I'm not very tech savvy. So
Fair enough.
If you find us. I know that it is under UFT Crested Butte Rendezvous on Facebook.
Okay.
You can get a link on the Crested Butte Marketplace or on the Gunnison Marketplace. I've posted it on Facebook the event
too. Yeah.
as a Crested Butte event. It's also in the paper and on KBUT.
Perfect. Cool. Is there anything I should have asked that I didn't know that I should have asked?
When are we going to go skiing again?
Probably about November would be my guess.
I would love to do that, Frank.
That would be good.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has. It has. You're usually packing then, though.
Well, as I remember, you were pretty darn good, too.
Well, we had fun. We definitely had fun, if nothing else.
Hey, we're still walking, so.
Yeah, that's true, too. And then one last question, and we talked about it right before we started recording. Who else should I interview?
Well, with those lists, there's Sis, there's Tuck.
Okay.
There's Carol Castning, is an old school, teacher from back in the day when I grew up.
That'd be really cool to hear.
She moved here in the 70s, and she really knows, I'd say anybody, if you really want to know about Crested Butte, it'd be a lot of the people that have been here earlier. Barbara Mason, Roland Mason's mother, who's running for commissioner.
Yeah.
And I would say that's an interesting story right there with Roland.
Yeah.
We grew up together, same class.
Oh, that's awesome.
You
That's
know,
awesome.
we bob for apples at my 6th birthday type of thing.
Right.
You know, but it is a small community in that sense. So I'd say just about any of the folks.
Yeah, I need to get some more
really
old-timers, actually. I
have some
haven't.
great stories to tell, and I think they would be really good to help, you know, keep some of that history in Crested Butte.
Totally. No, that's what part of this is for sure. So, awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And until next time.